It's truly incredible how Nobuo Uematsu absolutely nails the atmosphere of virtually everything he puts his hands on. I say virtually everything, and literally the only example that I could think of to disagree with straight up using the word everything is not the town music, but the music in the town. More about that later. It feels so natural to leave the upbeat adventure that he sets up in the overworld to this easygoing tune that really puts you at ease. For gameplay reasons, it makes sense. Dealing with monsters in the overworld when you don't have potions and you're down to the last surviving party member is stressful. But when the first notes of town plays, you know that you're safe. Here's the original. Everything here feels so thoughtful. Foregoing the orchestra for a guitar with some help from a flute and light strings really helps in constructing a suitable environment for the player to be. Instrumentation is so important to making music feel the right way, and this is a prime example. Now, most of my time listening to the source material is with the PlayStation version of the soundtrack. Regretfully, streaming services don't have the Pixel Remaster versions yet, and listening to the original NES version is not as constructive as I'd like it to be. While listening to the PlayStation version of this track, some sounds really caught my attention. Before I talk about these sounds though, I'd like to talk a little bit about how music worked in these older video games, and a ton of this is going to be intensely paraphrased. According to some quick Googling, an NES cartridge had from 24 kilobytes to up to a megabyte of storage, which feels really weird to say. Imagine saying you had between 2 and 83 donuts when someone asked you what you had for breakfast. Anyway, some additional reading says that the largest officially licensed cartridge was 768 kilobytes. This is significant because audio takes up a ton of space. MIDI certainly helps with keeping file sizes down, but programmers had to go even further. Instead of just storing the entire song on the cartridge, the games were coded to sequence the audio from samples that were stored on the cartridge. I'm not a programmer, so I'm not able to elaborate more here. Just know that each area doesn't start playing a pre-rendered song. To the best of my knowledge, this was done until at least through the lifespan of the original PlayStation, despite having an exponentially increased storage amount available from discs versus the cartridges. I'd imagine that nowadays this doesn't ever apply, at least not in games that are taking up 100 gigs of storage. The reason I bring this up is because there are two interesting sounds that play during Town that caught my ear. The noises that we're hearing is the sound of fingers moving along the strings and the use of the hand as percussion on the body of the guitar. We just went over how music works in older games. These aren't live recordings. Instead, enough care was put into this track by Nobuo that he added a sound effect of fingers moving along the strings to make the piece seem more believable. It's little touches like this that make me appreciate the work he's done even more, and I'll definitely be using this trick in my own version. Before we get to my version, there's another topic that I'd like to cover that doesn't necessarily concern the song Town, but rather the songs in the town. When you enter a city in FF1, and we'll use Cornelia as this example, there are a few places you can go. Shops, the inn, and church. In Final Fantasy I, all of these locations have a song that plays specific to that location. First, we have the church. There is certainly an attempt to change the mood of the music. You go from a calm, relaxing town theme to a somber and reverent theme in the church. These two tracks aren't conflicting, and the feeling you get when you walk in to revive one of your party members feels purposeful. Then we have the shop theme. I don't know about you all, but to me this feels incredibly jarring. So much that I'm kind of surprised that this is the first time I've noticed it. If you can't tell, I've put a lot of time into playing and even speedrunning FF1. I've heard these tracks many times. I still can't shake the feeling that when I hear these, it feels like the music in these shops clash with the music of town. The music itself is great. It's a wonderfully cheery theme, but the change in atmospheres between the track playing outside of the door and this one really rubbed me the wrong way. This doesn't sound nearly as bad in the Pixel remasters because the orchestra has enabled these songs to take on a softer tone. The inn has a theme that is very similar to the shop theme. Somehow this feels even more conflicting because of the instrumentation choices, making it even more energetic in the PlayStation version. Again, the Pixel Remaster does a wonderful job in adjusting the tone back to what one would expect to hear, but it still feels unnecessary. My first theory to try and downplay my own thinking was that the original NES sound font was substantially more limited than the PlayStation's. Have a listen to the transitions from the original. Because of the limited number of sounds the NES could make, the transitions here don't feel that drastic. Therefore, when the games were re-released, my theory was that the soundtrack stayed true to the original despite this. But then I looked at FF2. It also released with the same limitations of audio, but did not have a unique shop and inn theme. This leads me to think that I'm not the only one who ended up feeling this way. My curiosity first prompted me to look through the soundtracks of a few more games. I didn't see a track named Shop or Inn, so I booted up several to check and see. Ah. What I discovered pretty quickly is that FF1 is the only game I found, and please correct me if I miss something, that has a unique theme that plays in the shop and inn. In every other game that I looked at, inns and shops all play the same music that's playing in the town. I can't ask the man himself, but my theory is that what I've presented here is the reason why these themes were abandoned in future games. Having to write sympathetic pieces for these shops and inns was unnecessary when you can just use the music that was playing before you entered, which itself was designed to put you in the proper mindset in the first place. Attempting to modify that is counterproductive for something as arbitrary as a place to buy potions. Alternatively, they could have determined that the amount of space that they save by not having to write code to sequence audio in the shops allowed them to add a couple extra items, or a few more audio tracks. I don't know, I'm just a dude who doesn't know anything about how making games work. Anyway, it's because of all of the aforementioned that I have no plans to create a new piece of music for the inn and shops. The town theme will play the entirety of the time unless you go to revive at the church. That is deserving of a tone change. And while I'm on the topic of omissions, let me include another that did drive me wild before I started looking at this stuff. Would you like to guess another sound direction choice that did not make it into the next few games in the series? In fact, the next game that I can think of that features a unique song that plays in the menu is Final Fantasy XV, and even that is almost incomparable. The menu there is so much more complicated. You need it to craft magic and spend AP instead of just changing equipment. On top of that, music and video games in general have progressed so much that many locations in that game don't have themes like earlier ones. Modern games can use visuals to affect the atmosphere instead of relying wholly on music. Breaking into a unique menu track in 15 doesn't feel anywhere near as egregious as it does in 1. Whew. So, I will not be creating a separate menu piece, nor a shop piece, nor an inn piece with a singular exception. Should modifying the game's audio prove too difficult to just let the town music play in place of any of this music, I'll have to create something to use as a placeholder because despite my negative opinions, silence would be worse. And please don't take this as me being overly critical. This is my opinion, and even if I was 100% correct, this is very early in Nobuo's career, and these alleged mistakes were rectified in the very next release. How about we start talking about the actual town music again? I am very fond of the mixture of woodwinds and guitar, so I'll be using a very similar set of sounds in my version. Instead of the solo guitar at first, like we hear in the PlayStation version, I'm opting for a hybrid between it and the Pixel remaster. This means there'll be some cellos as a backing for the guitar at the start, with woodwinds coming in during the second repeat of the loop for texture and harmony/counter melody. I wish I could say that something formulated in my head about how I was going about doing this, but I literally just touched a keyboard and this 4-note sequence came out. I like the sound of it, so I went to expand on it a little bit. I wouldn't say that it created a problem as far as how the music sounded, but rather on how I would have to talk about it. Throughout the piece, I used the notes A sharp, C, D, E, F, and G. When I type these notes into a scale finder, this is what I'm presented with. I think what you're supposed to do is find where a piece of music feels at home, or a clean resolution point. I lean toward this being in D natural minor because the end of the loop resolves on D. It doesn't really make much of a difference, I suppose, but that's my final guess. For the woodwind section, I like the overall texture of using rubber chickens, flutes, squidwards, and bassoons. The rubber chickens and flutes are nearly identical with some minor differences, mostly at the end of the first two patterns. Squidwards and bassoons sort of take the middle and upper bass side of the spectrum, with a bit more of a harmony role, especially in patterns 3 and 4. Cellos cover the lowest end of the spectrum and end up following the rest of the music. Here's what it sounds like when it's all put together. I love how this turned out. What do you think? Your comments are very appreciated. If this was interesting or entertaining to you, please consider subscribing for the next video, which we will... There's actually a couple different directions to go. A reasonable guess would be to do the music for the church. But that track is a variation of the main Final Fantasy theme, which comes later. It's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. The other possibility is to do Castle Cornelia. I'm not sure which one I'll go with, but one of them will be done. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.